As dads, some days we feel like we have all the answers, and some days we feel like we don't have a clue. If that describes you, you're at the right place. This is the All Pro Dad Podcast. Welcome to the All Pro Dad Podcast. I'm your host, Ted Lowe, and I'm joined today by Mr. Mark Merrill.
Hey, Ted.
Mark, so glad you're here. And we have a special interview that we're going to get to share with you. We got to meet with head football coach at the University of Florida, Billy Napier, and he had so many incredible things to say. I am thrilled for people to get to hear this interview.
Yeah, what an awesome guy. And the exciting thing for me is when I first met Coach Napier a couple of years ago, he said, "Oh, I love All Pro Dad." He already knew about it.
Wow.
He said, I've been talking about All Pro Dad and sharing your resources, the All Pro Dad book, with my coaches and other friends back when he was in Louisiana coaching. So now he's in Florida, of course, at University of Florida. It's just fun to catch up with him and really hear from him. He's got a lot of wisdom.
He does. And I'm just going to say, Buck, who's on our podcast a lot, he was telling me earlier that when you guys did the event, that he went back and looked at the footage and he could see, he's like, wait, that's Coach Napier playing with his kids. And so he's playing. So I just think that speaks a lot for his character and who he is. So we're just going to dive right in. Coach Napier, thanks for joining us today. We really appreciate that. We're very excited. I'm very excited personally because my father-in-law coached football, high school football for 50 years. His name is George Hoblitzel, and he actually coached with your dad at Southeast Whitfield in Dalton, Georgia.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Hoblitzel, I've heard that many times in conversation. I'm not so sure I probably met Coach Hoblitzel at some point in my life.
Well, Coach is a big fan of yours, but I got to tell you, he's a bigger fan of your dad's. I'm telling you, he said, when I was telling him I was getting to do this, teared up a little bit. And he said, man, if you had to make a checklist of a good man, he said, Bill Napier would check every box. And so that's really powerful. And he was excited for this. So thanks for getting me, bonus points with in-laws. It's always a good thing. Well, Coach, today in every episode, we'll ask a question of the week that dads think about and process. And so the question of this week is, how do I deal with the pressure to perform? And we want to talk about that from a professional stance, but also at home. So my question would be, you're constantly dealing with both you guys. I'm here with Mark Merrill, the president of Family First, and both you guys, how do you navigate the pressure to perform at home and at work? And you talked about this before we started recording, and I thought what you were saying is really good. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I think first of all, what you're describing here is a real thing. I think regardless of your career or profession, my career is observed by millions of people, right? But I think it's a little bit of a reminder. I find myself kind of trying to back up and look at the big picture, consistently reminding yourself of purpose, keeping perspective. I do think that there's a lot of similarities to raising a family and maybe being in the coaching profession and working with young people. Yeah, I think for me, what I would say is you got to always get back to your purpose, and I think you got to keep people at the core of what you do and view you're really a steward of what you've been entrusted with. It's a platform, it's a blessing, it's an opportunity. And football is what we do. It's not necessarily who we are or big picture wise. From a faith perspective, it's not going to be well said or well thought. It's going to be about well done, and
ooh, that's really good.
Ultimately for us, I don't think we want to try to do it in a way where we have no regrets. And you're in a service profession, no different than I view players differently since I've had children. So I really believe that reminding yourself of your purpose, and then from a family perspective, the burden is real, right? in the managing the work-life balance to some degree. And some would argue you don't have that, but I would argue that you have to be intentional about creating it.
Right.
And I think our calendar is very seasonal. And I think we have to be intentional, not only for myself and Allie and Annie and Sammy and Charlie, but also for the people that work here in our organization. So I'm doing my part to prioritize my family, but at the same time, I'm helping all the people in the organization try to do the same thing by having a well-planned calendar. And I know the wives and people that work here, husbands, they appreciate knowing when we're working, because it's a very demanding profession, but also when we're off and when we need to go be intentional about our time with our family.
Coach, you mentioned something that actually wrote down right before we jumped on our time together on this podcast. And I wrote down 2 words of substituting performance and pressure. Those are real things, as you said, but pulling back, looking at the big picture, what are those fundamentals that we need to focus on? And you do that in your coaching career, but then what are the fundamentals of fatherhood? And you're right, pulling back. And I wrote down 2 words. One of them was purpose. I wrote down prayer and purpose, and really thinking about, why do I do what I do? What's the purpose? Is that for awards and accolades and applause? Or is that others centered? Is that God centered? And the same with fatherhood. It applies that as well. Why do I do what I do? And what's my ultimate purpose? And like you said, I'm a steward of time, resources, perhaps maybe a little talent that's been entrusted to me. And how am I going to steward that time and those resources well? That's really what we're talking about for a purpose, a person way beyond ourselves.
Yeah, if you're going to do something well, it takes time and it takes a team. And I think the game of football, much like any profession outside of maybe being in the ministry, those are all very conditional. That's one of the things I've stumbled upon this off season. It's like, hey, look, football, I've had all parts of my career where, hey, they love you when you're winning and they're critical of you maybe when you're losing, right? But it's a very conditional game, much like most careers are conditional, where we're fortunate in our faith that we have a unconditional element of life, an eternal element of our life that we can lean on. And I would tell you, man, one of the things I've learned in my career is that having that daily discipline to recenter, and through prayer, through devotion, scripture, discernment, when you're making daily decisions that impact hundreds of people, your family is at the core of that as well, right? Almost the challenge in our profession sometimes, and I'll tell the players sometimes, hey, I may spend as much time with you as I do with my kids, at times, certain times of the year.
Right.
So, I think when I say purpose, I'm specifically talking about that part. I think they're always referencing that unconditional part of stewarding the platform is you got to work hard and work smart, but not forfeit or compromise, some of these things that we value, and I think making the most of our opportunities. So, it's great to be in a profession where you feel as if you can make an impact,
right?
And be a good example and serve people. And it's one of the things I really love about what I do.
Coach, for you, we should ask you this on the top end. How old are your kids?
Annie's 12, and then the boys will be 10 and 8 this fall.
10 and 8.
So they're 9 and 7. They'll be 10 and 8 here pretty soon. They're all 2 years apart.
So I think dad's listening goes, hey, sometimes at work there's seasons that are busier than others. You can really speak to that. Like, how do you guys navigate, you and Allie navigate, hey, dad's going to be really busy during the season? How do you guys balance that out? Because you were sharing a few things before that felt like really good tips about how to do that in terms of vacations and things like that.
Yeah, you got to put it on the calendar. And you got to put it on the weekly agenda. I mean, you got to commit. And that requires really good communication with Allie. Time, I think relationships take time, and certainly there's no more important relationship than your wife and your children. And I think ultimately that's what we do. We take that calendar that we have and we try to. One of the cool things that we were able to work out this spring was my ability to pick the kids up, a couple of days a week. I had an opportunity to pick the kids up from their sport, whatever that may be, baseball, swimming, gymnastics, and just be there. Hey, to observe the end of practice. As simple as it seems, that ride home, that 15-minute ride home, maybe it's grabbing dinner on the way home. I don't know how you guys feel, but I think one of the things I've learned is that when you have multiple kids, some of the more special times to me is when I have time with just one. And I've learned that, hey, that can be, there's an exponential part to that, I think. So trying to do that a little bit this spring I thought we did that better. We're in year 3 at Florida. We're kind of, these things are challenging. So I think you finally get in a little bit of a rhythm. I think we do that with spring break. We do that with signing day break. We do that with Memorial Day break. We do that with our 3 weeks of vacation in the summer. We do that with open dates. And I just finalized during training camp this year, I have 4 what I call Napier family nights, where on our reload days, I commit to being out of the building at a certain time, and then we plan something to be together. Because training camp can turn into a blender if you don't watch out, right? So,
Coach, one of the things that really has stuck in my mind, I remember when you were first starting your coaching time at University of Florida, I came up and had a visit with you, and I'll never forget it. I arrived there a few minutes early and got into the conference room there, and then you walked in. I believe it was with your son, and you said, "Well, hey, we're 5 minutes behind schedule." And you said, "Hey, I just needed to pick my son up from practice." And I was like, right then and there, I was like, okay, this is the guy that really understands the fundamentals, that it's like you said, it's that importance of spending time with our kids and finding those pockets of time throughout the day, perhaps, to spend time. And the word that you said earlier was the word intentional. And I think that's what it's all about, intentionally spending one-on-one time with each of our kids. Because sometimes I found when our kids were growing up, I'd start saying, okay, everybody has to do this. Everybody has to be together. And we did that. But some of the most special times where our kids opened up was driving carpool to school or picking them up from a practice, like you said. And that's when perhaps they'll start opening up a little bit. And so I think one of those key takeaways for me is what you said, is really calendaring those times on our calendars, just like a team meeting. And nothing gets in the way of that except an emergency. So when I put that on my calendar, nobody can schedule over it. Nobody can take off of it unless it's some kind of emergency. Otherwise, it's a commitment that I keep.
Well, and I love what you said about you're setting the tone for not only you, but like all the other coaches and the rest. And that's huge. And I know there's a lot of dads listening. They're kind of in the same setup. Like that was a good piece of wisdom to go, hey, it's not even just about our family.
And look, now it's important for all the fathers out there. We all can identify, like, look, I'm trying to get better. One of the ways you learn is you make mistakes. So what I would say, the thing I was going to say that I think is that I'm learning is the age of your kids, is your approach and philosophy. You continue to have to evolve and adapt. It's a new set of scenarios and issues and problems you're helping your kids through, and their thoughts and their social settings, and they're, I think so. My kids being 12, 9, and 7, about to be 10 and 8. I mean, they are in the middle of it. So I think that you become more aware of that when they kind of get in that. I feel like 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, right in there, man. That is like prime time to have significant conversations.
Coach, you're so right. I was kind of chuckling to myself because you probably have this game plan in your mind of what you're going to do with the kids and how you're going to do it. And I had the same thing. And basically, using a football analogy, I had to call a lot of audibles. And some of them worked, some of them didn't. But you're right. It's constantly changing. We have to constantly adapt once we kind of see what's in front of us, see what might be blocking our path towards that goal line of being an all-pro dad, that we have to adjust and a lot of times call those audibles.
Absolutely.
And I would tell you, I'm working hard to do better at it. I think I was reading a book this summer and it talked about, hey, 100 years from now, I think if you viewed like your issues or problems or the things that are relevant today, like, hey, 100 years from now, what's really going to matter?
That's good.
I think
you're speaking to me, Coach. You're speaking to me.
So I think for me, I'm trying to get better at especially certain parts of the year. This spring, I thought we did a little bit. We improved. And then this summer, I thought was a lot of fun. And it's cool for me because my brothers and sisters have kids that are similar ages and the opportunities that we have. My sister-in-law was just in town, and we had 6 in the house for a whole week. 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7. But that was it. That was incredible. And I think what you said earlier is exactly right. And I think I was told that when I was young, put it on the calendar, don't compromise. So we try to do that as much as we can.
That's great. Coach, thank you very much. I'm hearing a lot of intentionality. You have any final things you'd like to say to our dads before you take off?
Yeah, just that you can start today. I think regardless of what's happened in the past, we all can get better. We all can make a commitment. We all can be intentional. Parenting is much like all parts of life, and I think regardless of whether things that happen, you can control some, you can't control other things, but regardless, we can be responsible. I was reading a book this summer that said, responsible can be broken down a couple different ways. Response-able, so I have the ability to choose my response, that can determine what happens next. Much like all parts of our life, we got free will. And I think when it comes to parenting, the scenarios that you encounter, the issues that you run across, and I think that we owe it to our kids to do the best job we can to respond the right way, and be good examples and be there for them. I think so that's what I would say is just like there's no day better than today to start trying to go about it the right way.
I love that. Coach, thank you so much for giving us time. We know you are a little bit busy right now, so thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
Mark, what'd you think about that?
Very encouraging, and several things really stuck out to me. One was about the intentionality, especially of his calendar and his schedule, and that is absolutely critical. And it's a pro move for dads, no question about it. Make sure we put everything relating to our spouses, if we're married, to our children on our calendars, and mark them as very important appointments that cannot be moved or canceled unless there's an emergency. The second thing really had to do with purpose, that he's really working, he's fighting, he's being a dad for someone way beyond himself. And as a Christian, Coach Napier really is really focused on what he is doing and how he's living out his faith in the marketplace. And, one thing that really came to my mind relating to that is I always have to ask my question, who or what am I performing for?
Right.
Why do I do what I do? And of course, as a Christian, I'm looking at that really my audience ultimately is God. Now, that doesn't mean I'm not striving to do things with and for my kids and friends and really serve them and love them well. But we have to have ultimately, what is our true north? What do we treasure most of all?
Well, and this is All Pro Dad podcast, and we got to talk to him very briefly about his dad. And you think just the legacy of that, because seriously, when I said people thought the world of his dad, and I think, we think about the legacy. I kept thinking about that over and over, thinking, wow, his dad passed that down to him. And now he's sitting here on this podcast, talking about, hey, you got to keep the main thing, and the most important thing. And at the end of 100 years, and also what I picked up from him, he's a learner. Like he kept saying, I read this and I did this. And I like what he said. It was, we got responsibility means response able. I mean, he's quoting somebody else, but I thought, that's great. And just like you said, that intentionality.
And did you pick this up, Ted? He used progressive tense. I'm an English major by background at college, University of Florida. But he used progressive tense versus past. He said, I'm learning, I'm studying, I'm researching. And so he's just like all of us is that work in progress. And I want to end my thoughts on a note of making sure that you guys that are listening right now, this is very important that, first of all, we're all on a fatherhood journey. We're always striving towards that goal of being an all-pro dad, but perhaps never arriving at that goal. And so the fundamentals of fatherhood tell us move the ball down the field, day in and day out, yard by yard, first down by first down. And when we fumble the ball going forward towards that goal, which we all do, I've done it many times, what do we do with it? That's the question of what do we do as we're moving the ball towards the goal line? And that is, for example, if we fumble it, apologize to our kids, apologize to our spouse. If we get the flag thrown on us, then take the hit, take the consequences, admit something when we're wrong, when we get the yellow flag thrown on us, and then continue that journey towards being the best dad that we can be and really doing it for our ultimate purpose.
I love that. I think that's a perfect way for this to wrap this up. This was great for me, thinking through who I want to be as a dad. And we hope, listeners, that it's been the same for you. Glad you're listening. We know you and your kids will be glad you did. Thanks for listening to the All Pro Dad podcast. All Pro Dad is the fatherhood program of the nonprofit Family First. Along with our motherhood program, iMom, we exist to help you love your family well. Subscribe to our daily email, the All Pro Dad Play of the Day, by going to allprodad.com/subscribe and get daily powerful and practical fatherhood tips in your inbox. The All Pro Dad podcast is hosted by me, Ted Lowe, produced by Bobby Lewis.